Welcome to those on Zoom and welcome to those in the room. This sounds a little bit loud to me. Is it okay for you guys? Volume-wise. So I'm counting about 14 people in the room tonight. So we're averaging a nice, steady group of about this size, live and in person. So that's good. Making our way, I think. My name is Thia Powers, and again, I'd like to welcome you to Insight Meditation Community of Charlotte. So today is February the 2nd, 2022. I love those numbers, 02/02/2022. And it happens to be Groundhog Day. So I almost did the whole talk on Groundhog Day because of the funny movie with Bill Murray that I think as a Sangha we watched many times. And if you haven't seen it, it's a Buddhist movie, really. It's from the Buddhist perspective. It's really nice. And because it has to do with suffering, I felt that I needed to mention it because our topic tonight is anxiety and ways to cope with anxiety, not just cope with anxiety, but how to create a calm and steady mind in the face of just this prolonged experience of COVID and unrest, and the list goes on and on. I don't have to tell you. So we do live in anxious and stressful times, not only us, but it seems like everyone around us. And we can feel overwhelmed at times or just burdened with anxiety and worry. But this practice and these practices that we'll talk about tonight, we can take refuge in. And we can soothe and calm ourselves, and we can become a refuge for others in this way. I'd like to pause here and acknowledge the broad spectrum of anxiety that exists, from mild and manageable to severe and debilitating. So I realize that this is not a panacea for everything, but tonight's talk is aimed to the mild and moderate stress and anxiety that comes with day-to-day living. Hopefully, however, this talk can be beneficial in some way to everyone. So yes, we have antidotes and we have actions to take to ease anxiety, stress, and suffering. And I'll be using the words anxiety, stress, and suffering interchangeably tonight. I have to tell you, the first time I drafted this talk, I went into such depth of investigating body sensations and mind stories and all the parts of anxiety that when I went back and read it, I almost had a panic attack. And I decided maybe that wasn't the approach. So we have a different approach. So how do we do this? How do we calm an anxious mind? First, we already have everything that we need. We really don't need that much. And if we're willing, I think that's the key. We can apply the teachings and really reduce suffering and the suffering of others. So I'd like to look at the definition from the suttas of suffering or anxiety, and look at the cause of suffering, and then move through 5 ways to address this. So in Sutta 141 in the Majjhima Nikaya, the Buddha says, "And what, friends, is the noble truth of suffering? Birth is suffering, aging is suffering, death is anxiety, sorrow is anxiety, lamentation and pain are anxiety and suffering, grief and despair are suffering. Not to obtain what one wants is suffering. In short, the 5 aggregates, that's us, affected by clinging, that's what we do, are suffering." So it pretty much sounds like everything is suffering from that list. And I think everything has the potential to be suffering, which is why this is so important to look at this anxiety. The causes on the next page. What, friends, is the noble truth of the origin of suffering? It is craving, clinging, which brings renewal of being. That sounds good, but it's really not that great. Is accompanied by delight and lust, delights in this and that. It craves for sensual pleasures, it craves for being, and it craves for non-being. This is called the noble truth of the origin of suffering. So you've heard this a lot in this Sangha, the first and second noble truths. And why do you hear it so much? And I think the reason, a great reason, is that the Buddha, and you've heard this a lot too, said that he only taught suffering and the end of suffering, that if you were only going to have one takeaway, he really wanted that to be it. And so many things point right back to this topic tonight. Let's look at 5 specific practices to ease anxiety and suffering. So first of all, anxiety is one of the hindrances. It's named in the teachings, and it can also be referred to as restlessness and worry. Gil Fronsdale writes, having a hindrance like anxiety is like wandering through a maze while staring at the ground. Being mindful is like standing above the same maze and getting an overview of the path. So I think that one of the causes of suffering is, as Judy Leaf describes it, and I love that she calls it this, the world according to me, insert your name there. We all have different clingings and different cravings, very specific to us. Some struggle with things that others easily let go of. And the flip side of that behavior is aversion, the things that we push away and we have no patience for. Aversion is simply another strong preference for a different outcome, or for circumstances to be different. One of my favorite guided meditations is by Bhikkhu Analayo, and at the end, you're deep in this meditation, he says, don't cling. Don't cling. And it really, you get it, you know. So if clinging and aversion is the root, how do we see the roots and chop away at clinging and aversion? Richard Rohr says, all spirituality is what we do with our pain. So true. So these practices that we're going to go through now, 5 practices, are for chopping away at the roots of your and my anxiety and suffering. And they're in no particular order, except at the end, I'll tell you why they're in this order. The first one is metta. And we had a wonderful hour of metta recently. Doesn't that feel expansive? And I needed it. It felt great. Thank you. That was wonderful, Clyde. If this is all you have time to do, just flash metta at yourself. Just flash some loving kindness or compassion at yourself. If you notice during the day that you're just drenched in anxiety, that works great. Just go, wow, I'm really anxious. Let me just, boy, you know, it's okay. You're okay. I mean, that goes a long way. So this is recognizing or recognizing its acceptance, its non-judgment. It's all in a moment's time when we can just quickly send ourselves some metta. And you can do this many times a day. So get creative with your metta. It doesn't have to be traditional or formulaic. Sometimes it can kind of feel that way. But the heart's intention is the important thing. Well-wishing, just well-wishing for the ease of suffering. May I be at ease is all you have to think. May others with anxiety be at ease. So, include other people. This is a big camp. I mean, anxiety is part of life. So, and then make it even bigger. May all beings be at ease. Sometimes if I'm outside and I'm practicing metta, I love to look up at the sky, that never-ending slow motion drift, and say metta or feel metta. It's so spacious and calming, and it really trains my mind and heart towards a wholesome response to my anxiety. So that's the first practice, metta. The second practice is breathing. Breathing is good. This is part of the Anapanasati Sutta. And we begin with regular breath, no change, just observing. If you're not driving a car, it helps to kind of close your eyes and breathe about 10 mindful breaths. Just takes a few minutes to do that. One of Thich Nhat Hanh's most famous teachings is simply breathing in, I know I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I know I'm breathing out. The sutta says, when mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated, it is of great fruit and great benefit. One of my meditation teachers, Paul Ortega, used to say, if you can breathe, you can meditate, no matter where you are. So a second technique on breath is not in the suttas. It takes a little bit longer, but it's really effective. It's known as the relaxation response. And it's also a yoga technique known as pranayama. So I know we have a lot of yogis in the Sangha. You'll find a place to be still for probably 10 or 20 minutes. 20 minutes gives the most powerful relief, since if you're very agitated, it takes your nervous system almost 20 minutes to come back to calm and normal. The parasympathetic nervous system needs about 20 minutes. That's why a 20-minute meditation is kind of a nice one to work with, at least 20. So close your eyes now and just notice your breath, not changing anything. Just breathing in and out through the nose. And now just notice the in-breath, how long it might be. And notice the out-breath, how long it might be. And you want to start by making these about the same length. You could say in, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4. And now begin to gently shift this so that your out breath is longer. Do this in a really easy way, just making it a little longer. If this brings you any stress at all, just revert to natural breathing. But if this feels comfortable, you can slowly make the out breath longer and longer. You might end up with a 4-to-6 or a 4-to-8 ratio if you're counting. Don't make it a competition. Keep it very easeful. So you get the idea there. You can open your eyes. When you do this for a long time, focusing on the out breath and making it longer and longer, you get very calm. If you're wanting to raise your energy, you make your in-breath the focus. You make it longer, but that's not what we're doing here. Eventually, you can just drop the counting. You don't need the numbers, but if you are anxious, sometimes just the numbers kind of help you focus and stay on your breath. So that's a really effective method, I find. I think a lot of people use that one. So the third practice I'd like to recommend tonight is movement. I know that when I feel anxious, a good walk around the block, getting outside, being in fresh air, whether it's mindful walking or just regular walking, just moving instead of brooding or sitting in front of the laptop is hugely helpful. A long hike in a beautiful place is grounding, healing, balancing. If you're in an urban setting, you can still mindfully walk. You can breathe, see, smell, hear, bring yourself back to your senses with this kind of walk. Enjoy the fact that you can move, or do some yoga. Roll out your mat. Usually a slow stretch class, or just moving however you want to move is the best. Even 5 or 10 minutes can make a difference. Sometimes, though, a strenuous or a longer class can burn off excess anxiety or energy and bring us back into balance. So really just paying attention to your body here is part of the medicine for anxiety. Tuning in, what do you need? These are wholesome ways to deal with it instead of getting stuck in the loop and all the things that we do that are not wholesome, that cause a bigger problem. The fourth practice for tonight is body scanning. This is part of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, or the Satipatthana Sutta. Tonight, I'm going to bring a simplified version that we can do fairly quickly. We don't have a lot of time, but we have enough to do a quick body scan. But when you have time, it's good to be quite thorough with this. This is often used in the 10-day Vipassana retreats. When we're calming down, slowing down is often the key. So when you have time for a longer scan, always choose that. Also, I'd like to recommend a classic guided meditation by Bhikkhu Analayo at the Barry Center for Buddhist Studies. It's on their website, which is buddhistinquiry.org. You can find him doing a guided meditation there that's quite something. I think it's about 45 minutes long. So for most of us, a simple body scan, and you can close your eyes again to just experience this brief scan. It starts either laying down or in a seated position. Bring your energy to the crown of the head and systematically move your awareness and your attention down through the sense organs of the eyes, the nose, the ears, the mouth, through the neck and into the shoulders, scanning down through the arms and hands, bringing your attention to the torso, the belly, the hips, the pelvic floor, the legs and the feet, breathing into these areas as you scan them with attention, and noting if any of these areas seem more accessible, or some may seem numb or not accessible or painful. Some are pleasant or neutral. Noting all of this with the same kind of equanimity, just observing what is the container of your body like right now. Starting at the feet, sweeping back up through the calves and knees, thighs and hips, pelvic area, belly, lungs, heart, the arms, the neck, up through the face, and ending at the crown of the head. And when you practice this at home, it helps to just sit quietly for a few minutes. This is a very grounding practice. So you can open your eyes. Our last practice is meditation. Take your anxiety to your cushion or your seat. recognize that stress and anxiety is just a state of agitation. It's overexcitement. And some people just live in this agitated state. Tim Ferriss says that constant busyness can actually be a form of laziness. I think that is so interesting. He says constant activity can channel all of this restlessness and anxiety at the expense of never investigating it, never sitting with it, never addressing it. It's just constant distraction. That really got my attention because I think at times I'm guilty of that. I'm a doer. Gil Fronsdale writes, because restlessness and anxiety are uncomfortable, it's difficult to pay attention to them. Paradoxically, restlessness and anxiety is itself sometimes a symptom of not being able to be present for discomfort. So it's kind of a loop. Until you pay attention to it, it just keeps getting more uncomfortable. So yes, it's uncomfortable to sit with it, but patience, discipline, and courage are needed, and we can sit with these states. So I want to make a distinction between physical agitation, including pain, and mental restlessness. We bring a lot of this on ourselves with too much caffeine and overstimulation sometimes. If it's a physical thing, sometimes you can close your eyes and imagine that the inside of your body is very spacious, almost like a big tennis court or basketball court. And you can let the energy just have plenty of room to move around in there. So there's no constriction. So that's a nice visualization. When you're working with pain, if it's appropriate and possible, I think it's good to try and alleviate the pain. If it can't be alleviated and you see the opportunity to meditate with it, try and separate the pain from the reaction to the pain is the very first step there to address restlessness. And then with mental restlessness, that is looping old stories, regrets, persistent thinking, the inability to focus. And that is like sitting with a difficult child, like babysitting yourself when you're meditating, and it just is, just wild in there. So just observe the swarming, the bees in your head. Don't buy into the storyline. And do not give in to irrational compulsions like the impulse that it's so important to check your phone immediately. That's how we get out of this. And when we're doing this, we can appreciate any moment of stillness that comes. Just notice any opening and any stillness and appreciate that instead of focusing constantly on when it's not still, when it's not open. In the Tibetan tradition of Lojong or mind training, there's a pithy reminder that advises, make adversity the path of awakening. And another that says, work with whatever you encounter. And I think with anxiety, that makes a lot of sense. That's what's happening. That's all you've got. If you don't work with it, it just magnifies. So to do just this, I use a couple of questions to unpack anxiety when I take it to the cushion to try to see the roots of it. And these might help you. When you feel anxious or stressed and you're headed to your cushion, think to yourself, is there some sort of payoff that I'm getting from this? Do I enjoy this adrenaline or this drama somehow that anxiety is bringing right now? Another good question that I ask is, if craving is the root, what exactly am I craving? What am I craving, or what do I want to be different? And you don't need to search for an answer. Just kind of like drop that seed in to like planting a seed, and don't even try to answer it, but just being aware of those sneaky little motivations might be enough. We can always look to the Eightfold Path as the direct ways to the end of suffering. Using the book, The Noble Eightfold Path by Bhikkhu Bodhi is a fail-safe way to refocus yourself in a wholesome way. And in closing, the mindset of allowing is powerful to deconstruct anxiety. The allowing mind says, I'm okay if it happens, and I'm okay if it doesn't. That's a powerful place to be. So I hope some of this resonated with you tonight. I hope that it's useful to calm anxious and worried mind, to reduce stress. And the recap of these recommended tools is metta, breathing, movement, body scan, meditation. So MBMBM, metta, breathing, movement, body scan, meditation. You should be able to get a handle on it. The March issue of Lion's Roar magazine has anxiety as its topic this month, and it is packed with good articles and references. While we might be overcoming anxiety, worry, and restlessness for our own benefit, it's also so helpful to be mindful of all the people around us who are also anxious. We live in such a restless time. Hopefully we can all support each other in being nourished by a heart that's deeply at rest. That's what Sangha is for, so we can nourish each other. Richard Rohr says, we must become intimate, understand, listen to our suffering, be in relationship with it, study it, see the root, trace the outline of its path in order to soften around it, and be with it non-distractedly. Allow some dignity, and by doing so, integrating a wisdom that anxiety brings that can be learned no other way. Paradoxically, this intimate relationship with suffering and anxiety can be the very vehicle for abiding in happiness. May this be so.